Hello, my beautiful bookish people. In this video, I'm going to talk about Arsenic and Adobo by meeeee Manansala. So, there are some things in this book that I really like the fact that we have an Asian American author being published early by Book of the Month. That's cool, we're finally getting some representation. We also have a really neat section in here because the author is Filipino American. She leaves an author's note about how this book is her experiences written true to her as a Filipino American raised in Chicago, and that though the character Lila is fictional and different from her, they very much hold a lot of her experiences. Another thing that I really like about it is that in the author's note section, she also talks about how her Homeland Filipino sensitivity reader pointed out that there are scenes that were triggering on her because they hit so close to home in regards to the way the Philippine National Police enforces President Rodrigo Duterte's drug war. So, I like that we have that acknowledgement and that it went through proofreading and that, this stuff is what she wanted to talk about, even though it's meant to be a cozy murder mystery because it's written from a Filipino American perspective. She also gives content warnings for indications of evidence planting and police intimidation, as well as drug use, fat phobia, racism, and domestic violence. I just wish that the content warning had also included language of diabetes that is rather harmful. And how do I know that? Because I asked a couple of my friends with diabetes, because it kind of raised my hackles a little bit as a person who is chronically ill to see another chronic illness being talked about kind of as a butt of a joke constantly in this fashion. And while I want to also acknowledge that people often use humor to deal with really hard-hitting things, that's most certainly a coping mechanism that people have. It just kind of personally rubbed me the wrong way, and, well, we'll get into that a little bit later. Another thing I really like about this book is the glossary and pronunciation guide. One, as a person who isn't very familiar with Tagalog, this is super duper helpful. Two, it's really cool that I'm getting to learn specific pieces of the language that get incorporated in with the English of this book. And I really appreciate that I didn't have to put the book down, look it up, try to figure it out, which sometimes may or may not work depending on how Google's feeling that day. But what's really cool is that you have the just regular Tagalog words and their explanations, and you also have Taglish explanations, aka Tagalog English, a phrase that is specifically Tagalog English, not Tagalog being used along with English, even though this is a very minute detail where it's oh my guli is Taglish for if you don't want to say the God part of OMG, guli literally means vegetables, so this phrase doesn't make sense to translate, and they noted that, and I really like that. Also, I just kind of like the idea of saying, oh my vegetable. That's just, I like it. It's weird. And I like it because I'm weird that way, I guess. Anyways, let me give you the book description so you can know what to expect if you do choose to read this. The first book in a new culinary cozy series full of sharp humor and delectable dishes, one of which might just be killer. When Lila Macapagal moves back home to recover from a horrible breakup, her life seems to be following all of the typical rom-com tropes. She's tasked with saving her Tita Rosie's failing restaurant, and she has to deal with a group of matchmaking aunties who shower her with love and judgment. But when a notoriously nasty food critic, who happens to be her ex-boyfriend, drops dead moments after a confrontation with Lila, her life quickly swerves from a Nora Ephron romp to an Agatha Christie case. With the cops treating her like she's the one and only suspect, and the shady landlord looking to finally kick the Macapagal family out and resell the storefront, Lila's left with no choice but to conduct her own investigation. Armed with the nosy auntie network, her barista best bud, and her trusted dachshund Longanisa, Lila takes on this tasty, twisted case and soon finds her own neck on the chopping block. And yeah, that's really what to expect out of this book. That is a completely accurate description. I do like the twists and turns that it took. My only drawback, again, goes back to the use of how diabetes is featured. While the language used around diabetes in this book totally comes up in real life and is accurate to real-life experiences, that doesn't mean I want to see that kind of representation published frequently, because it's very, very misleading. So let me just get to those examples. Lila brought these cookies for me, son. I think you've had enough to write a proper review of them. You're supposed to be watching your sugar levels anyways, remember? Did you take your insulin? Derek glared at him, but accepted the handkerchief and wiped the sweat and crumbs from his face. Of course I took my insulin. I'm not a little kid, Ed. I can take care of myself. Okay, let's break this down for a hot second. When you see someone who is a diabetic, who is struggling, and who is also eating sweets, you don't question them on whether or not they've taken insulin just because they're eating sweets. If you're concerned about their health because they don't look so hot and they aren't acting like they normally act because they're in the middle of really low blood sugar or really high blood sugar, which greatly affects the brain, you would ask, hey, are you okay? Describe what's going on that's out of the normal for what you typically see with that person. Say, I'm a little concerned. Do you feel all right? When was the last time you checked your glucose levels? Maybe we need to do something to adjust right now. And that would be a helpful way of putting it, instead of being super judgmental and being like, these are my desserts. Why are you eating them? Did you take insulin? That kind of language totally happens, but that doesn't mean it should. The next quote around it is, if it was because of his blood sugar, our desserts are not to blame. He knew what he was doing. Mr. Long can't pin that on us. Because this is the part where the family's being questioned about the death of the person with diabetes who, well, it's pretty obvious he doesn't die from diabetes because it's a murder mystery, and this is the guy that died. So that's not a spoiler. But, do I need to explain why this is a little bit problematic? I'm just saying. People who go into diabetic comas, it's not just because they eat sweets. Once you take insulin, your blood sugar is going to drop like a stone because it's too much insulin. Your body doesn't know how to regulate insulin to help you regulate your actual blood glucose. You have to eat carbs when you take insulin, because even if you're just trying to get down from high glucose numbers, you want to keep an eye on it, but chances are you're probably going to tank anyways, and you want to keep a sweet or maybe a complex carb. I don't know how your body deals with stuff. That's how each person has to individually figure out what is best to eat with their insulin. Hi, Editor Victoria here. I just wanted to make a quick note that there are instances of managing diabetes without insulin where you do need to be really careful about what you eat. I have specifically made meal plans for my family members who experienced this and were trying to manage their diabetes without insulin, and they were type 2. And in that instance, you do need to be super duper careful about how many carbs you're giving that person at a time, because they may be on a medication that can help their body naturally, well, not naturally because they're on a medication to help with it, but it's not straight up just dumping insulin into their system. So there are instances where you do need to be really mindful about what kind of foods you're eating at the time, along with your medication and whatnot. I'm floored that they used insulin and then talked crap about the guy for eating sweets about it, because, like, insulin's what's going to drop you pretty darn quick, and depending on how well your body's doing and how well you're managing it, and really, like, this can change from day to day depending on how you and your body are doing, and, like, diabetes is really, really hard to manage, so you definitely want to have snacks with you at all times just in case you do drop and stuff like this. So I just wanted to put that out there for clarification purposes. And then we go into more victim blaming about diabetes with, Derek wasn't in good health though, Adina said. He was a diabetic with a sweet tooth and didn't always mind the doctor's orders. The fact that he was eating dessert before dying is proof of that. Okay, if you have doctor's orders to be careful about your sweet intake, that doesn't mean you can't have sweets and that you're not doing your best job to deal with this. I already covered that in my last section where I talked about the other quote. I'm so disappointed with this language. And then we get another joke about it. The other ones weren't really that jokey. This one felt like a jokey, you'll see. She demolished her waffles, which she drowned in syrup, and then ordered a slice of triple chocolate tuxedo pie, another sugar bomb. If I ate the way she did, I'd have lost a foot to diabetes by now. You most certainly can lose a foot, toes, other limbs to diabetes. It isn't just because of how you choose to eat and how sugary of a meal you had. If you've just had a fuck ton of insulin and you're trying to recover from a crash, you need to get that up before you go into a diabetic coma from low blood glucose. So, yeah, really, really disappointed in the diabetes rep in this book. I've explained to you why. I really wish that it wasn't even in here, because it doesn't really add that much to the story, so much as it feels like a plot point of why he could have died. But it felt irresponsibly used to have blamed him for that in these circumstances. I would not recommend sending this to any of your diabetic friends, because I have asked my friends, I'm like, hey, I'm going to read you these quotes, which I just read to you, and said, with or without context, I really don't feel good about that language. They're like, yeah, no, I would have yeeted that book so hard. So if you're looking for a cozy murder mystery, this most certainly fulfills that role. It has some problematic language about diabetes. Overall, did I enjoy the book? Yeah, it was fun. It was exactly as it was described, minus that piece. And would I continue on with this series with the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mysteries? I think I probably would, just to see where it goes, because it was a fun, quick read for me. I don't understand why this language was included and why it needed to be included. I think that the murder part of the murder mystery and the mystery around why he died at first could have been accomplished a different way and been more effective, or you can still use that same language and then talk about why that's problematic to use that language. I personally don't get why it was done this way. So just be aware of that. Overall, this kind of hits middle of the road for me because I can't highly recommend it to people because of how I'm uncomfortable with the language. But if you're looking for a cozy murder mystery and that part won't bother you, then this may be a good book to pick up, especially if you're looking to support Asian American authors. And specifically if you want a look into Filipino American culture, which is also included in this book, which is really cool. Just be aware. And maybe pick it up, maybe don't. That's my review of this book. So hopefully you liked it. Let me know if you're a diabetic, how would you feel about the language there? Am I not doing a good job of helping to explain why I felt uncomfortable with it, even though I don't have it, though I do have a chronic illness and have experienced kind of similar language in my life and not been appreciative of it? What are some other really good murder mystery books that you like that I could pick up? And if you've made it this far, leave me a yellow heart or just a heart emoji down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!